People doing extraordinary things to help others.
If he didn't do what he did, we would have died.
Heroic acts that have sometimes meant the difference between life and death.
And he was just crying, "Don't let me die, don't let me die, save me, save me."
Amazing acts of courage.
It was just a natural reaction. This guy needs help.
Captured on dash cams, CCTV, and mobile phones. Incredible stories from the UK.
He put his life at risk just to save me.
And across the world.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
All the people that assisted with my rescues that day are my heroes.
We genuinely owe our lives to him.
Today on Saved on Camera. Two friends on holiday in Kenya face disaster as their fishing boat sinks.
I knew that the clock was ticking, and as soon as it got dark, we were done. It was terrifying.
In Alabama, USA, a skydiving student in a panic spins out of control, endangering his and the instructor's lives.
He kind of just pushed off the plane without actually stepping off the plane. It immediately sent us all onto our backs.
I come out of the plane and we start flipping around, the horizon's spinning. Your orientation gets pretty messed up when you start doing that.
Thought I was going to die.
In the UK's Lake District, a climber makes a wrong move, causing him to take a fall.
Smacked into the cliff 20 feet below.
Having injured his foot, the only way to rescue him is by helicopter. But there's a problem.
The helicopter pilot started saying, "This is a really windy night. I'm really struggling."
And in London, a fire has started in the middle of the night in a block of flats.
He was shouting and screaming that his friend was trapped in a flat across the road. It was a basement flat and it was on fire.
The residents are all asleep.
Just get out.
They need to get them out, and quickly.
Spin it up the smoke.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. 10 miles off the coast of Mombasa. Sinking.
A dream trip for two men turns into their worst nightmare.
Mayday, we're going down, we're going down, we're going down. We're essentially dead in the water.
Miles from shore in the Indian Ocean, with no means of communication and darkness falling, they must try to hang on until help arrives.
I've never felt so helpless in my life. What happens if nobody comes? We're going to die.
Friends Ash and Mark first met at a festival close to both their hearts.
Glastonbury Festival, I've been going since 1997 and never missed a year. That's where I met Mark around 12 years ago. Bit of a random encounter, actually. We'd just been watching Snoop Dogg on the Pyramid stage, I think. We just hit it off straight away. Yeah, it's just like an instant connection, friendship. It was good. 11, 12 years later, we're still going together now. It spawned a great friendship.
But keen for new adventures, they decided to swap the muddy fields of Glastonbury for the sandy shores of Kenya.
Mark's been going to Kenya for the last few years with his daughter. So he suggested, instead of Glastonbury, let's go to Kenya. I'm like, awesome. But I'll take them on safari, show you around the country. It'd be an amazing experience.
And for Mark, there's another pull to Kenya.
I've been big game fishing, and particularly in Kenya, since I was 9, 10 years old, on the boat nearly every morning.
Seasoned fisherman Mark was excited that Ash was going to join him this time.
We decided to book just one half-day trip, just as a taster for him. Virtually no interest at all in fishing. It's not really my bag. However, the prospect of a day out on the ocean and on a cool boat and all that, I thought, well, yeah, that sounds pretty cool, and give it a go.
And the day started off promisingly.
So when I first saw the fishing boat, I was expecting some little tin pot wooden fishing boat, but no, it was a big twin-engined yacht-type sports boat.
So we set off quite early in the morning, myself, Ash and a crew of 5.
And within half an hour, we catch these tuna.
And I was buzzing that Ash would call something.
So I thought, oh yeah, this is good, this. But then it just all got a bit quiet.
Which is the normal in big game fishing, where you can spend hours and hours with no activity. So the skipper decided to steam a little bit further down the coast to find another spot where he thought there might be some more fish activity. We're going further and further out to sea. We ended up probably about 9-10 miles offshore. Ash was having a little kip. I was chatting to the crew.
So I kind of woke up from my doze, a little bit groggy. Then all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. The reel starts whirring, and the crew just jump into life, and it's marlin, 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 marlin.
It was all systems go, as they'd caught one of the fastest fish in the world.
We'd hooked this black marlin, which is kind of like the holy grail of game fishing.
Mark's got into the fighting chair and he's battling with this fish. Everybody was excited. He's clearly in his element.
The fish then takes 100, 200 metres of line, dancing on the surface, jumping.
And I'm sat on the upper deck watching all this and thinking, oh, come on, mate, get it done.
The captain of the boat puts both engines on full power.
The boat was having to get reversed and repositioned and basically trying to track or follow the fish. And in doing all this manoeuvring, quite a lot of water was washing over onto the lower deck.
The boat's designed to take on an element of water on the deck, but it was quite obvious there was more water on the boat than there should have been.
The increasing amount of water on board was starting to ring alarm bells, but the crew seemed to have it under control. But for how long?
They went and opened up the hatch to look down into the engine room. And when they came up, you know, there was a clear look of concern on their faces.
The water was rising faster than they could bail it out, and panic was starting to set in.
At the back of the boat's going under. The owner of the boat comes upstairs. He's got panic or fear or something in his eyes.
And even first-time fisherman Ash could tell the situation was looking precarious.
Ash said to me at that time, he's like, "Are we going to be okay, mate?" And I wasn't completely sure that we didn't have quite a serious problem.
The crew were still making desperate but futile attempts to avoid the boat sinking.
The captain decided to put both engines on full power.
I think the idea was either gun it until we get to shore, or at least get as close as we can.
But the boat's taken on that much water, the engine's under strain.
2 or 3 minutes into that, one of the engine failed. Oh, no.
The engine alarm's going off, so you've got beep, 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 beep. Not long after that, the second engine goes. We're essentially dead in the water.
That's when the Mayday call went out.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
Mayday, mayday, we're going down, we're going down, we're going down.
That's the last thing you want to be hearing when you're on a boat.
As the boat began sinking, the panic on board escalated.
The alarm's going off, the boat's starting to tilt.
We're sinking, we're going down.
When their SOS call was received, there was a glimmer of hope.
Somebody from the shore picked up the Mayday call, saying, you know, where are you?
But that hope was to be cruelly dashed.
There wasn't any GPS on the boat, so we couldn't give any coordinates.
Oh, the situation's bad at this point.
And time was running out as the boat started to sink from under them.
At this stage, the boat is going on its side, so we're all clambering over the side of the boat. People are slipping off the boat and we're holding them back on.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
The boat was going to sink. We knew we needed to get off it. It was at this point when I said to the guys that when this thing goes down, we need to make sure we're well away from it. And everyone moves away and let go of the boat, and down it went.
Within a couple of minutes, the whole thing just went.
Later, miles from shore and with no help in sight, fear takes hold of the men.
I said to Ash, don't mention the S word.
Then it spelled out S-H-A-R-K. It was harrowing times, man.
In America, a man learning to skydive goes horribly wrong.
I thought I'd lost both instructors, and the rules of skydiving is lose one, continue with the skydive, lose two, pull.
His actions done in panic make everything worse.
When he pulled out the pilot chute to deploy the parachute, it went around Jason's neck.
Jason Hills has a passion for extreme sports, one of which takes place 14,000 feet in the air.
I love skydiving. It's freedom. I don't think about anything else but just what I'm doing at that moment. Everything leaves my mind. It's kind of like my therapy.
Jason chose a center in Alabama to make his 4th ever skydive. Instructors Sam and Stephen were there to prepare him.
It's usually not a problem teaching somebody on the ground, but when you get up in the air and there's the stress and the sensations and the noise, and it's almost like fight or flight, and they're just they're worried about surviving.
As they reached 14,000 feet, Jason's fears had heightened.
As soon as it got to altitude, it became real when that door opened.
The jump is supposed to be, you exit the plane with 2 instructors holding on to you.
The student's supposed to give us a count, like a 1, 2, go. And we got the 1, 2, go, but he never really went. He kind of just pushed off the plane without actually stepping off the plane. And once that happened, it just kind of got a little weird from there.
It was like I was pulled out of the door and almost thrown over the top of Jason.
The unique situation in this one is he was upside down like immediately out the door. Usually, they flip over as we're going out.
I come out of the plane and you start flipping around, the horizon's spinning. Your orientation gets pretty messed up when you start doing that.
With the clock ticking, the instructors must get this dive under control. But in the chaos, the worst happened.
I opted to let go because Steven, he seemed to be more in control than I was.
I thought that I was the one that was supposed to let go. After I let go, I realized that no one was holding on to Jason.
I knew I had lost Steven, I knew I had lost Sam, and I was alone in the air.
He was starting to rotate, and generally when a student starts to rotate, it only gets faster and a little more violent.
I thought I had lost both instructors, and the rules of skydiving is lose one, continue with the skydive, lose two, pull.
Due to Jason's orientation, when he pulled out the pilot chute to deploy the parachute, it just went through the middle of them and then around Jason's neck.
When it was wrapped around my neck, I thought I was going to die.
His instructors had only seconds to react before the main parachute would open and likely strangle Jason.
When the pilot shoots out, the parachute's right behind it. I was just trying to make sure to get the lines out from around his neck before the parachute came out.
In the nick of time, Sam had managed to remove the lines from Jason's neck.
There was definitely a huge relief that he had a parachute and was going to be able to fly it now.
But as Jason had pulled the whole parachute too early, he was about to lose contact with his instructors.
After his parachute deployed, and we separated from each other and came on down to a lower altitude before opening our parachutes. First thing we were trying to do is make radio contact so he didn't fly too far away from the airport.
Usually, you're not under canopy very long before you have radio communication with your instructor. The problem was I had opened so high, I floated around for 6,000 feet before I had radio communication with him.
Finally, the ground was within reach. He just needed to land.
He landed about like a typical student does. They usually land a little bit hard on their first, I would say, 6 landings before they actually figure it out.
When I got to the ground, it was relief. It was just amazing. I was so happy that I lived through that.
After such a close shave, all 3 men had made it down pretty unscathed.
It was a little jokey and light because we try not to make it seem like, you know, oh my God, dude, you just almost died.
It was more of just a camaraderie and laughing about it, and hopefully it won't happen again.
And despite his close call, Jason, a natural-born adrenaline junkie, isn't planning on curbing his skydiving anytime soon.
A lot of people would have quit skydiving after that jump and maybe started bowling. But not me. I came back and my jump count's around 240 skydives.
But this is one skydive instructor Sam is not adding to his list of best adventures ever.
To date, the jump with Jason is my worst student jump that I've had. I actually have not had a student get away from me, deploy around his neck. Yes, this was quite a unique situation, honestly.
And Jason knows he owes his life to Sam and colleague Stephen.
I was so thankful to those guys. They did what they were supposed to, but they're very humble about it. They saved my life.
Earlier, we saw 2 friends stranded in the Indian Ocean.
Mayday, mayday.
After the boat they chartered for their fishing boat sank.
Within a couple of minutes, the whole thing just went. And down it went, and that was it.
With their mayday calls having gone unanswered, they feared the worst.
We are adrift 10 or so miles offshore and we're at the mercy of the ocean. It was terrifying.
Now, in deep water, adrenaline and survival instincts kicked in fast.
We needed to stick together, so we created a circle and we all held on to each other's buoyancy aids and rings, and so we were like, you know, nobody let go of anybody.
But as the men treaded water, fears were starting to surface.
For me, our biggest risk was drowning. What happens if nobody comes? We're going to drown? We know we're going to die.
Never felt so helpless in my life. I knew that the clock was ticking, and as soon as it got dark, we were done.
What they didn't know was that their mayday call had been picked up by a Singaporean oil tanker waiting to port in Mombasa. Chief Officer Lucas Hopp and Captain Robert Mikulski heard the call.
We were on the bridge together, and then suddenly we hear on the VHF Mayday calling.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. Dreamcatcher.
Mayday, name of the vessel, Dreamcatcher, and we are going down.
It's human's life. That's the most important for us to rescue them. And then we start looking around to try to find them.
Despite wanting to help, without exact coordinates, they were searching for a needle in a haystack.
It's a very large area to search for, so it is very, very big problem to find the vessel.
Back with the men, drowning wasn't the only worry for the group left floating in the open ocean.
There was a point where I said to Ash, don't mention the S word.
And I thought he meant shipwreck. Then he spelled out S-H-A-R-K. Shark. And I'm like, what on earth have you said that for? Because I'd never even crossed my mind at all about sharks in the water until he said that. And of course, once he said that, that's all I could think about.
So that was going to, be a concern, especially after it got dark.
I became very aware of how much I was paddling my feet, treading water, and I made a conscious effort to minimize my movement.
We observed some fishing boat. We have binoculars, and the distance was about 8 miles. The vessel was capsizing.
The swell was incredible, really. You know, 3, 4, 5 meters at a time. All you could see was a wall of ocean. It was unbelievable, unbelievable.
So you're scanning the coastline. On the horizon, we could see a ship.
Finally, they had a glimmer of hope.
All our focus was on this vessel. What if it just keeps going? What if it hasn't seen us? What if it just sails past us? Because I knew that that was pretty much our only chance. Nobody else were coming, and if this tanker doesn't stop, we're done.
And we just watched it about 40 minutes of heading towards us, but not directly to us, but heading in our direction.
Anyway, it was difficult to see. We could see only heads. We could see only heads in the water.
And I guess it got to about half a mile away from us, and then it just stopped in the water. And it sat there for what seemed like an eternity, with nothing happening at all.
It was harrowing times, man.
Finally, the ship's lifeboat was on its way, and the wait looked to be over.
We lowered the boat, and in about 5 minutes, we were very close to the people in the water.
Then I swam out, got the rope, and then took that back to the crew, and then we all ultimately pulled ourselves up on the rope.
We just start pulling them to our lifeboat to pick them up on board.
As the nightmare came to an end, Ash was overwhelmed as he stepped onto the lifeboat.
I looked up, and the guy piloting the boat, Chief Officer Hop, looked down at me.
I said to him, now you are safe.
So all the adrenaline and everything else just left my body, and I just absolutely crumbled.
Yeah, he looks happy that he's on the boat now.
And that was it. It was the most amazing feeling.
But there was one last challenge they had to face.
Picking up survivors from the water was only the first part of the rescuing operation. When they came alongside the vessel, it was the second part, which was also very difficult because of swell and state of the sea.
As we were looking out, we could see the ladder doing this, and there was a very real danger of us getting smashed and squashed between the lifeboat and the ship.
One more difficult thing was that all those survivors had seasick, so they were weak at the moment of climbing to the ladder.
Thankfully, there was a large crew on the tanker to assist with the final stage of the rescue.
When all of them were on board safely, I took a deep breath, and I was happy that we could save them.
And they just really looked after us, you know. Chief Officer Hop reappeared. He came to see us, made sure we were okay.
Lots of crew members were coming up and asking if they could take our photos. They've been involved in quite a major rescue operation, and they wanted to come and see who they'd plucked out of the ocean.
Now safe, the adrenaline left the men, and the reality of the ordeal hit them both.
Me and Ash, we literally just looked at each other and were like, wow, like, I cannot believe what we've just been through, and we're so, so lucky.
In the Lake District, in the UK, a dramatic ground and air rescue is launched when a climber falls off the side of a mountain.
Next thing I remember, was just smacked into the cliff 20 feet below.
Keswick, a market town sitting at the north of England's Lake District. It's a popular stop-off for tourists and outdoor adventurers, and it attracted Bob Woods and his wife to open their own B&B in 2004.
We're very lucky to live here in the Lake District because everyone's so friendly. Everyone's here for almost the same reasons. Everyone just loves the outdoors.
Bob's days are full, and not just with the B&B.
I play in a ukulele band in Cockermouth called the Kooks. I do a lot of mountain biking, lots of climbing, weather permitting. I've been climbing 15, 16 years, 17 years. So I'm very competent. My head, which is the most important part, my head generally is all over it.
But it's not his head that is the problem. It is his sense of direction, something Bob would admit causes a few jokes in his local climbing club.
I've got a very big reputation for getting lost on routes, and I'm often wandering all over the place, which brings lots of amusement to lots of people. Even me, because it's like, you know, what's the worst that can happen?
Bob was going to find that out, and on a special day too.
It was a Keswick Mountain Club meet, and it just happened on my birthday, July the 18th. It was Miners Crag. Miners Crag is over on the Newlands Valley, so it's quite remote. It's not so well climbed, so there's lots of stuff where there's never been grabbed hold of before.
The climbers divided into pairs. Having started with a relatively easy climb, Bob and his partner Dave decided to take it up a notch.
Harler is hard, very severe, but we were warmed up and we're both quite competent, so off we went. The first part was really straightforward and I led it very comfortably.
Their first position, known as a pitch, they'd successfully climbed, and it was Bob's partner Dave who took the second ascent.
He went up maybe 15 feet-ish, and he said, "Oh, blimey, this feels a lot harder, Bob. Do you fancy having a go?" And I got 15 feet above Dave, and I said, I put a bit of gear in. A cam is like a little device. You push a little sort of lever on the end of it, and it gets smaller. And then when you feed it into the crack, it just gets wider in the crack and hopefully holds. And I clipped it and I said to Dave, if I fall on this, there is no way on earth this is stopping me going anywhere. I moved up past it and I just reached up my left hand to quite a small crimp, put my fingers on it, and it just all collapsed underneath my fingers, and then I fell backwards. I smacked into the cliff 20 feet below Dave. Dave is now taking my full weight, going at whatever miles per hour.
Moving at that speed could drag both climbers off the crag.
Dave had put a bit of gear in, and lucky enough that held both of us. So this one tiny little bit of gear, about an inch wide in the crack, had both of us hanging on it.
The pair were dangling off the cliff, and Bob knew a further fall would likely have been fatal.
It was just pure rock underneath us. It was just lots of rocks. And hopefully it just been very quick.
Later, things go from bad to worse.
I just sort of sat for a couple of minutes, stood up, agony, sat down, stood up again stupidly. The pain was awful.
Earlier, we saw friends Ash and Mark rescued following their fishing boat sinking off the coast of Mombasa. Six months later, and back on dry land, Mark and Ash are meeting up for the first time with the men who saved them.
You know, Ash was sort of, it was never his kind of thing. He was like, you said this was going to be a good trip out. You know, look what's happened. I was like, oh my word.
Actually, when we were still in Kenya, it wasn't so bad. But once we got home back to the UK, that's when the, you know, when you see your family and all the rest, that's when the shock of it all hit more so, I think.
And how thankful we are to you for,
of course,
you know,
of course. Saved our lives.
Yeah.
Literally, saved our lives.
My only worry was that if you can climb with no injury on board
right,
the vessel.
Yeah, that was quite a climb up the side of the tanker. But not that it mattered. But yeah, but what a relief, you know, and of course you're the first face that I saw, and you looked down at me and you said,
that was a good face to see. Like,
yeah, so you looked at me, I'm all obviously stressed, and I looked up and you looked down and you went, you're safe now. And as soon as you said that, I just crumpled completely.
The men know just how lucky they were and who they owe their lives to.
If we hadn't spotted them, they would have been in a hopeless situation because it was some 5 hours until darkness, and after darkness it would be impossible to find them in the water.
All of us on the boat owe our lives to the crew of the oil tanker. I genuinely believe, had they not found us, we wouldn't be here today.
As for next year's adventures, the friends have some important decisions to make.
Yeah, so we haven't thought about next year yet. go back for the 50th anniversary of Glastonbury and go back to what we know and do every year. Maybe I will go back to Glastonbury, maybe, I don't know. But certainly no more boats.
In the UK, a police officer searching a house is interrupted by a neighbour.
He was shouting and screaming that his friend was trapped in a flat across the road. It was a basement flat and that it was on fire.
He rushes into the smoke-filled building to alert the residents.
It was pretty bad. You couldn't see the exit at all.
But can this police officer get everybody out in time?
We need to keep on at them. Look, we need to get out now, get out now.
Just get out. It's just filling up with smoke.
PC Neil Dobson is a police dog handler and has been with the force for 22 years.
It's all I wanted to do since I joined the police. I'd had dogs all my life. I wanted to work dogs, and I think it's the best job in the world. I like helping people, obviously, and I like going out there and making a difference. My bread and butter work is normally searching for people that run away from the police, searching for drugs in vehicles, drugs in houses, firearms and hidden cash.
But on this night in Croydon, PC Dobson becomes involved in an emergency that's not his usual type of call-out.
I was searching a house for drugs when we had a knock at the door from a member of the public who was shouting and screaming that his friend was trapped in a flat across the road. It was a basement flat and that it was on fire. As soon as you're told there's a fire, the lives are in danger, so everything you're doing right there and then gets dropped. We came out of the address, looked across the road and saw smoke bellowing out of the windows of the flat and can hear the guy inside screaming. I've run to the back of my car to put my dog away. 3 of my colleagues have run across the road and they've managed to drag the guy out through a kitchen window. It was then that a member of the public pointed out that this basement flat was connected to flats above, which were 3 stories high. And being 1 o'clock in the morning, everyone's asleep.
With thick smoke rising rapidly into the upstairs flats and residents unaware of the situation, PC Dobson races inside to raise the alarm.
You don't think, you just do. It's just kind of an instinct thing. There's people in trouble, and I know that if it was one of my family members, I'd know I'd want someone to go in and help them. So at that point, you just start shouting, fire, fire, get out.
Fire's growing, yeah? Just get out.
And you can't really rely on them. There may be vulnerable people that can't hear, can't see, disabilities. So every single flat had to be visibly cleared.
PC Dobson has to think fast to avoid potential disaster.
It was at that point that I realised, actually, I've really got to just start kicking doors in, because there wasn't time to allow for people to react and come out and put their clothes on. It's a case of you need to get out now, because the smoke was starting to fill up into the ground floor. There were 2 girls that came in with me into the flats, and they were helping residents out. There was a mum and a baby that needed some help getting out of the flat. They were helping them. My job pretty much was the brute force of getting all the doors open. I got all the way up to the 3rd floor. It was ticking in my mind that I didn't have long inside. I was concerned about the smoke coming up, because it was already on the ground floor when I went in. You're wondering, what's it going to be like when I come back down? The smoke had now hit the 1st floor. It's disorientating when you can't see, and it's a little bit confusing, and obviously you can't breathe, so you have to hold your breath.
Go, I can't see.
You could see probably about to sort of here. It was pretty bad. You couldn't see the exit at all.
But with the smoke rising and time running out, PC Dobson gave it one last go.
Tried kicking and kicking it, then we realised it was bolted from the inside.
PC Dobson manages to get into the last flat and thankfully discover that nobody is home.
I forced in probably about 8 to 9 doors. Yeah, and it was the final one that bust my foot. It was the fact that I was aided by a big adrenaline rush, so You don't even notice it at the time. It wasn't till probably about 2 hours after the incident that I went to get out of the car and stood on my foot, and then I was like, ouch.
PC Dobson guided the disorientated residents through the thick smoke towards the exit.
People were standing out now on the street in dressing gowns, and you hear the fire engines coming and you realise how serious it is.
Usually, it's the fire brigade who are first on the scene of a fire, so it comes as quite a surprise to Station Officer Catherine Skinner to find police officers.
Normally, we will be there quicker and on scene dealing with the situation long before the police or the ambulance arrive. Although they said they had got everybody out, we needed to do a secondary sweep just to make sure, especially seeing as it would have been quite difficult to them in the smoke, and we needed people in breathing apparatus just to ensure that that was the case. Smoke was quite thick and black, and that certainly raises my blood pressure a little bit, because what I'm sending my firefighters into could be a dangerous situation. A basement's a particularly dangerous place for a fire. Quite often there's very limited ventilation, difficult to gain access. You have to go through a heat barrier descending into a basement. There is a potential for a greater loss of life.
After a thorough search of the building, firefighters confirm that no residents are left inside the smoke-filled building.
I was concerned when we first arrived that it would spread to neighbouring flats or the flats above, but because the crew was so quick in their attack on the fire, we did contain it to the original flat.
With all residents accounted for and thinking nothing of his heroic actions, it was business as usual for PC Dobson.
Basically, I came out and obviously the carnage outside of people in shock. They were treated by ambulance crews and the fire brigade, and I then left the scene. So I literally went straight back into shift mode and cracked on with the rest of my shift.
It's great that the police were there so early to get people out, because the smoke would have been getting worse and worse. So the earlier the occupants were out, the better. And it certainly made our lives easier knowing that we didn't have 4 floors worth of occupants to evacuate ourselves.
I spoke to my sergeant afterwards and told him that I'd injured my foot. He said he'd look at my body cam footage to see how the injury took place so he could do the injury report, and then obviously he saw the whole incident take place.
PC Dobson's own safety was the last thing on his mind.
All I wanted was peace of mind that everybody did get out, because the smoke was that bad that I think you probably would not have survived much longer in there. Will I do it again? Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I wouldn't even think about it. To me, it's just doing my job.
Oh, good lad. Good lad.
Back in the UK, 2 climbers are dangling off a cliff, held on by just a tiny bit of gear. If it fails, they face certain injury or even death.
It was just pure rock underneath us. It was just lots of rocks. And hopefully it just been very quick. 10, 15 minutes later, a couple of the guys had finished the climb, they'd seen us, so they made their way across and they fixed themselves into the rock. Then they fixed themselves to Dave, and they got Dave back up onto the ledge. And they had me tied off. They just said, Bob, we're gonna have to lower you down. So they lowered me down gently to where the first place I stopped, where I could sort of like get myself really comfortable.
Here, Bob realised his injuries.
I just sort of sat for a couple of minutes, stood up, agony, sat down, stood up again stupidly. The pain was awful.
They were going to need to be rescued, and the call came through to the Keswick Mountain Rescue Team and John Hunston.
Somebody who's fallen from a crack and potentially have much more serious injuries. They might have some internal bleeding, which is always difficult to contend with on the hill.
As John reached the scene, he was surprised to see a familiar face.
I thought, I recognised him, and Bob said to me, hello, John. So, oh, hello, Bob, what are you doing here? It's very strange to rescue somebody that you find you know.
But any catch-up between the friends would have to wait, as the question of rescuing Bob was much more pressing.
The first thing they did, they assessed where I'd fallen from, what I fell on, and what parts were hurting. When he just touched my heel, it was like He said, we're not sure, he says, but it could be a broken heel.
His injury would stop Bob being able to climb down, even with the mountain rescue team as his guide.
The particular area that he was in was extremely broken and bouldery and unpleasant. So getting air support in that sort of situation helps enormously.
We're about 3.5 hours in now. And then there's like the great big, and this great big red and white helicopters appeared, sort of like 400 or 500 feet above.
Right away, there was a problem.
The helicopter pilot started saying, this is a really windy night up here. I'm gonna have to try and line up into the wind. And he tried it about 4 or 5 times, and he said, this is, you know, I'm really struggling. Eventually, maybe 30 minutes later, he felt confident enough to lower his winchman down.
But the elements were getting worse for the pilot.
He said, it's so windy now. He said, we can't start winching you in because the wind is, you're going to start spinning. We're just going to, like, go up a little and just fly off at speed to keep the stretcher in a straight position.
An enduring vision of him sort of disappearing into the sunset underneath his helicopter.
When Bob made it inside the helicopter, the crew did their best to end his ordeal on a happy note.
The blokes winched me into the helicopter, and they started doing all the paperwork there and said, oh, July the 18th. And then they started singing happy birthday to me, which was really nice, because nobody else had that day. They were the first.
At the hospital, X-rays confirmed that Bob did, in fact, break his heel, but he knows it could have been much worse.
If I'd have hit my head on my neck, that would have been all over there, maybe, so I did get away with it.
Bob knows that it's all down to the skills and dedication of Keswick Mountain Rescue, and he still pops in to visit them and update them on his fundraising activities.
Hiya, John.
All right,
How you doing?
Good to see you again.
I was just walking past, I thought I'd pop in and say hello.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice.
How's Tricks?
Is it 2 years ago now?
2 years July.
Is it? Is it? Yeah, yeah.
But still hurting.
Is it?
Still hurting.
Oh dear.
Doctor said 1 year, now it's been 2+, and I'm still, still not quite right.
So what does that stop you doing?
Nothing.
Oh right, good.
I'm just it's not a pain, it's discomfort. It's as opposed to pain.
Yeah.
Bob, though, retains a positive outlook on the events of that July day.
It wasn't a bad way to finish a day up. A nice helicopter ride in the sunset.
It was a great birthday present, wasn't it?
Oh,
Helicopter
right,
ride. Yeah, you pay a lot for that.
I'm sure I owe somebody something, a lot of money for that. Especially you guys, walking all the way in.
And he has a fundraising update for John after a successful busking event with his ukulele.
So we started at 11, and by 1 o'clock we had raised about 300 quid plus. We know it's going to a very, very good cause.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We really appreciate that.
I was very, very lucky, yeah. It could have gone very, very wrong.
Starting to get nasty.
We've got to get out of here.
January 2003. A captain and his ship are in trouble on the Atlantic Ocean. The crew aboard the Finnish cargo ship Camilla struggles to get its 7,000 horsepower engine up and running. It's been breaking down all through the night.
When the engine stopped working, I woke up instantly with the notion that something was wrong.
The massive 12-cylinder engine has a badly damaged oil filter. So there's no oil to lubricate the engine's crankshaft. The crankshaft grinds against the bearings that connect it to the rotating pistons. That constant friction has caused the engine to seize up and die. Captain Markku Rakula knows that with no engine power, he and his 15 crew members are trapped. His 28-year-old third officer, Mayu Sari, loves the adventure of working on the high seas. But this is a new and frightening experience.
Coffee, do you want one? Kävi ilmi, että when we realized that the engine couldn't be fixed, I remember thinking, this is an impossible situation. I thought to myself, now something is going to happen, and there's nothing I can do about it. I felt numb at that moment.
The Camilla is stranded more than 450 kilometers from the nearest port, St. John's. The Grand Banks off the east coast of Canada is the last place you want engine failure. The water here is shallow. A shallow seabed creates massive waves. The area is also known for its unpredictable weather. More than 7,000 ships have sunk in these waters over the centuries. And now, even worse news is rolling in.
And tell him to double check with ESCO. Mayu?
Just a sec. Doesn't look good. Coming straight for us.
We've run out of time.
A cyclone is approaching from the southwest. Winds will hit 150 kilometers an hour. Waves will reach 24 meters, enough to sink the stricken Camilla. The storm is still hours away, but Captain Rakula knows that help is also far away. Anyone who tries to rescue his crew will have to outrace the storm. Rakula is forced to consider all options for escape. The nearest tugboat is 20 hours away. But it's his best hope.
We're going to have to try for a tug.
Tugboat? Out this far in this? Do you really think that...
Of course.
Even though I knew that our situation was uncertain, I could not show it. Or else everyone would start worrying, and that would lead to panic.
Because the Camilla is unable to move forward, it has no resistance against the power of the storm. When the cyclone's waves hit this shallow floor, their energy gets compressed, creating huge breaking waves, which can smash windows, shift cargo, and potentially even turn the ship upside down.
The waves come in like this, and beat and shake you. And there is nothing you can do about it.
Be right here on top of us. One thing's for sure. We've got to get out of here. I'll call the owners.
North 46, 55, 1. West 46, 49, 8.
This is Mayu Sari's first job as an officer. During her 6-year sailing career, she has never had to fear for her life. Until now.
When we realized that the storm would hit us if we didn't get out of its way, I had to switch into a certain mental mode in order to cope with the situation. Because even if something was going to happen to us, I couldn't start crying there or panicking.
Starting to get nasty. Waves 6, maybe 7 meters.
If a tugboat's going to save them, it will have to outrace the storm.
Hey, the engine won't be fixed for 24 hours, so we're looking for a tug.
Yeah, okay. Okay, good, thanks.
What'd they say?
They're going to try to send us a tug.
Great.
Yeah.
So how's it looking out there? It's a big low-pressure system moving in from the east. It's going to be poor visibility, high winds. Waves are going to be very big.
More than 600 kilometers from the stranded Camilla is home base for 103 Search and Rescue Squadron. Veteran helicopter pilot Major Gilbert Thibault arrives on duty.
We are asked to go in situations that are extremes, and we have to make decisions also that may mean somebody's gonna live or somebody's gonna die.
In the coming hours, Thibault will face many life and death decisions as he and his team put their lives on the line to save 16 sailors. The Camilla has now been stranded for 2 hours. The storm is moving closer.
Okay, it will do. Right, thanks.
There are no tugboats close enough to get to the Camilla before the storm hits. Captain Rakula will have to find another way to save the lives of his crew.
We could not afford to take the risk of staying there in a storm of this magnitude, and then in the morning to have to check whether we were afloat or had drowned.
He now faces the moment every skipper dreads.
When I started to make a decision about abandoning the ship, it was certainly the toughest decision of my life and of my entire sailing career.
Rescue Center Halifax to Camilla.
Go ahead, Halifax.
Please state your present coordinates.
46, 56, 8, north. 46, 47, 1, west.
You got that?
Siinä oli yksi hetki, kun... There was a moment when I was quite terrified. It happened when the Coast Guard asked how many people our life rafts can take. Then I thought if we have to go on those rafts in that weather, that will be really serious. But somehow I managed to wipe these thoughts from my mind and calm myself down.
The ship is now rocking so uncontrollably that it's simply not possible to attempt escape in the lifeboats.
We cannot stay here, but lifeboats are not an option.
What we're going to do is send a helicopter to you.
There's 16 of us!
Your situation has been designated an M1 emergency.
An M1 emergency. Top priority because the Camilla's crew is in danger of injury or death.
Now we see.
The hopes of rescue for Captain Rakala, Third Officer Sari, and the rest of the crew now hinge on a helicopter reaching them before the storm hits. But the nearest helicopter is in Gander, 618 kilometers away. St. John's is the closest point of land. The entire journey is more than 1,000 kilometers. On top of that, the helicopter will have to hover for more than an hour to hoist the 16 sailors to safety. It's impossible without refueling.
Urgent. Cormorant standby crew report to operations immediately. Cormorant standby crew report to operations immediately.
Okay, guys. We have got a cargo vessel out of Finland. They've lost their engine. She's almost 450 kilometers offshore from St. John's.
This mission will push men and machine to the limit. Major Thibault's co-pilot is Captain Andrew Mercer. Mercer spent years flying tactical helicopters around the world. But on this six-man team, he's the new kid on the block.
Obviously, we can't get there and back on a full tank.
Hibernia. It's probably going to be our best bet.
Major Thibault is counting on a fuel stop at the Hibernia oil drilling platform, located 150 kilometers from the Camilla. It will enable the helicopter to make the entire round trip.
As far as time on scene, I know you guys would like as much as possible.
Major Thibault has calculated exactly how much time they can spend on the rescue itself and still have enough fuel to get back to home base.
Necessary goes. By my calculation, I can give you 75 minutes.
That's less than 5 minutes to hoist each of the 16 sailors.
In 30 minutes.
With each passing minute, weather conditions deteriorate as the storm moves closer to the stricken vessel. Before abandoning ship, the crew closes all doors and conduits in order to make the Camilla as watertight as possible. Third Officer Mayusari notifies everyone of the decision to abandon ship.
We're abandoning ship. Hey, everybody, wake up! Let's go! Let's go!
Back at the base, Major Thibault is relying on this impressive piece of machinery to save the lives of the sailors. The newly acquired CH-149 Cormorant. He has stripped excess equipment from the helicopter to make room for 16 passengers. He must eliminate all unnecessary weight. The lighter the load, the more fuel they can carry. And Thibault knows that every drop will count on this mission.
An helicopter is not like a car. You cannot run out of fuel and park it on the side of the road. I mean, running out of fuel is not an option.
With little to do but wait, Captain Rakala considers the consequences of his decision.
Making a decision is sometimes a little difficult, but if you make right decisions, then anyone who knows about sailing will know that this guy is not dumb. He has been able to make the right decision at a critical moment. But if you make wrong decisions, after that your career may be gone, as well.
Sen jälkeen voi olla karrierikin mennyt.
Sergeant Rob Vedito will be responsible for operating the rescue hoist. Before takeoff, he double-checks to make sure that this lifeline is in perfect working order.
Right handout is approved. Surface winds are 310, gusting 20 knots. Clear takeoff from the south pad.
The cyclone is closing in on the Camilla. For the rescuers, the race is on to get there first.
I would lie to you if the adrenaline's not pumping. The adrenaline is definitely pumping, and your mind is rushing and going through all these different scenarios. How can I make it better? Where can I go for fuel? Do I need medical? It just keeps going on and on and on and on and on. You just keep going through the scenario, going through problems, coming up with answers, solutions. It's just a constant, your head's going all the time until it's done at the end.
For Major Thibault, the Cormorant is the ultimate flying machine. Its 3 powerful turbine engines produce an incredible 6,400 horsepower.
I often compare the Cormorant to an F1 race car, a machine with that much technology in it, and it's also a machine that you push to its limit fairly often in the job we do.
The Cormorant-shaped rotor blades, protected by titanium strips along the edge, improve lift and increase speed. It also means this helicopter can operate successfully in extremely high winds. But even the Cormorant has its limits. If they get caught in the approaching cyclone, Major Thibault will have to abort the mission. Rescue Headquarters has warned Captain Rakala that it's not certain the helicopter can get to the Camilla.
Of course, there was a sense of distress when we were told that the helicopter may not be able to come if the wind picks up. And there was naturally a sense of uncertainty on the ship about what was really going to happen. Will they be able to get us out of there, or will they not be able to get us out?
Because the crew is in danger, the ship's owners have already contacted the families of everyone on board.
Yksi ehkä pahimmista tunteista, mitä tuli sitten. One of the worst feelings was the fact that my parents and sister knew about my situation, but I couldn't contact them to tell them how it's going so far. Silloin tuli. It was really bad to think about how they must have felt when they didn't really know anything. Well, other than the fact that the ship was in distress, at sea, in a storm. I started reading a book to get my mind away from it, so that I would not panic. I sat around, took deep breaths, and calmed myself down. Not to do anything stupid like get nervous or overreact. Hengittelin rauhallisesti ja rauhoittelin itseäni, että nyt ei saa tehdä mitään typerää. Ei saa hermostua eikä ylireagoida. It did help me. It was like a meditation. Ikään kuin meditaation omainen.
The pilot's plan to refuel at the Hibernia oil rig is shattered. They've just been informed that Hibernia can't supply them with fuel.
Well, that's too bad. For us. Okay, over. Go figure, huh? Hibernia out of fuel.
We got information saying that the Hibernia had run out of fuel, and being the biggest oil producer out there, it was kind of just ironic that they didn't have the fuel for us.
Major Thibault was forced to divert to another oil rig to refuel.
We'll make our way over to the Henry Goodrich.
The Cormorant heads for the Henry Goodrich drilling platform, an additional 35 kilometers away from the Camilla. The diversion will add 10 minutes to the journey. That means less time for the rescue itself. And now there's no hope of beating the storm. It's closing in at a rate of 85 kilometers an hour. The Henry Goodrich is a floating rig, not anchored to the seabed. So landing in high winds is extremely dangerous. Thibault will not be able to control the landing from his side of the helicopter.
Never landed on a floating rig before, huh? It's different.
So to keep the helicopter into wind and to keep visual with the platform, I had to let Andrew fly. I didn't have the references on my side.
Co-pilot Mercer has never landed on a floating platform before. It's a rare and difficult operation that requires enormous skill and nerves of steel, a critical moment to capture on video. One of the search and rescue technicians starts the camera rolling as co-pilot Mercer closes in on the rig.
All yours, Andrew. I'll let them know we're coming in. Rescue 911 to Goodrich. Seeking permission to land for refueling, over.
The Cormorant has landed. But now the helicopter's in danger of being blown off the platform. In order to prevent this, Mercer has to reverse the angle of the rotor blade, a technique known as negative pitch. This creates a downward force and pushes the helicopter onto the landing pad.
We actually sucked ourselves onto the oil rig. It's a really neat thing that we can do. I don't think very many actually helicopters can do that.
On the Camilla, Captain Rakala prepares to abandon ship.
Yes, one can't help but wonder what my wife was thinking and whether we would ever see each other again in this world. When this thought came, I just had to push it to the back of my mind because I had to look after things at hand and then think about it again when the right time came.
Appreciate the top up. Glad to be of help, Major. Best of luck out there. Thanks. We'll need it.
After the stop on the oil platform, the Cormorant has just enough fuel to get them to the Camilla, hover for 75 minutes to hoist the stranded crew to safety, and fly 477 kilometers to the nearest land at St. John's. But then, just before takeoff, the unthinkable happens.
Okay, we're set. Com failure. We've got the com failure. Switching over to main system. Andrew, can you read me? Rob, can you hear me?
The Cormorant's complex fiber optic communication system has stopped working.
Rob, can you hear me?
I'm not getting you.
Okay, we're gonna do this by the book. We're gonna run a full system check.
While Thibault and Mercer can talk to each other, they can't communicate with flight engineer Rob Vedito in the back, and they have to be able to talk to him to execute the hoisting operations.
With Combreaker 3, AC bus. Can you read me now, Rob? Combreaker 2 on DC bus. Combreaker 3 on DC bus.
Now the Major has a gut-wrenching decision to make. Press on or abort the mission altogether.
This is not good. Combreaker 3, AC bus. Can you hear me now, Rob? Okay. Let's run everything twice. Combreaker 3, DC bus.
The first thing that came in our head was that we won't be able to do this. You know, if we cannot communicate, there's no way we're going to be able to recover these people. So the first thing I think for all the crew members was you know, we're stuck. We're going to have to go back.
There's only an hour and 40 minutes until sunset. Barely enough time to get to the Camilla and do a 75-minute hoisting operation. Thibault and Mercer systematically reset all the breakers on board.
Rob, anything?
Can you hear me, Rob? Gotcha, Major. Loud and clear.
Eventually, success.
We're back. Let's get moving here.
The delay has cost another precious 15 minutes.
When I left my cabin for the last time, I had those things we were allowed to take with us, a few papers and a passport. I had packed my suitcase and I think I'd made my bed, just in case if the ship doesn't sink, somebody might come and see how I had lived there.
Captain Rakula orders everyone to put on their survival suits. These dry suits are waterproof. They're made with neoprene, a synthetic rubber that contains millions of tiny air bubbles. The bubbles act as an insulator and help with buoyancy. Dry suits provide warmth by protecting the clothing beneath from wind and water. Without the suit, the bitterly cold water of the Atlantic would kill them.
The last thing I wrote in the logbook on the command bridge was, of course, that most difficult fact, that we are now going to abandon the ship.
Captain Rakula is now certain the ship and its cargo are doomed. He relays the grim news to the ship's owners in Finland.
You dial, huh? Yeah.
Sure.
Niin me puettiin ne pelastuspuvut sitten niinku. It was pretty difficult with that suit. He would hold the phone and I would push the buttons and he would talk. It was a strange feeling that this may be the last time they'd hear from us.
Rakula here.
ETA 5 minutes on scene. Andrew, get the captain.
As the Cormorant closes in on the Camilla, the search and rescue technicians make final preparations.
Rescue 911 to Camilla.
Rescue 911 to Camilla.
This is Camilla, go ahead, 911.
Rescue helicopter approximately 5 minutes from you. All crew should gather on deck.
Tell them everyone's down there. We're just on our way.
We're on our way.
Hang in there, over.
Hey, we should go.
One last smoke. After this trip, I quit.
There's now just over an hour of daylight left. After flying for 3.5 hours, Thibault and Mercer catch their first sight of the stranded ship. From a distance, the situation doesn't look life-threatening. But as they move in, it becomes obvious that this operation will test Thibault's helicopter and crew to the limit.
Suddenly realized this huge 300-foot piece of metal is out of control. Very slowly, it's not spinning like a cork, it's moving very slowly, rolling, twisting, corking, sliding up and down the waves. And you suddenly realize this is not a stable platform. We have to rescue 16 people.
The storm is closing in. Scientists call this type of storm a meteorological bomb because it is intensifying at such an explosive rate. Within a few short hours, its winds have more than doubled in force, from 35 to 75 kilometers per hour, with its highest waves reaching over 80 feet, the height of a 7-story building.
My impression was that these guys were not gonna make it through the night, and we had to take them off. Otherwise, that was the end for them.
Major Thibault has a huge challenge. He has to figure out how to get as close as possible in order to lower his men onto the moving target. But if he flies too low, the cormorant could run into the mast of the tossing ship with deadly results.
When the helicopter did arrive, I was naturally very excited that now we are finally getting out of here.
This is gonna be tough. I'm gonna swing around for another look.
The jubilation on board the Camilla doesn't last long.
But all of a sudden it circled the boat and then headed away from us. Well, that is when we all thought, hey, wait a minute, has the wind now gotten so bad that we won't be taken away from here?
The sailors are certain the helicopter is abandoning them, their one and only hope of escape vanishing on the horizon. Major Thibault circles around to check out potential obstacles and determine his best plan of attack. He has precious few seconds to decide if a rescue is feasible. Thibault must keep the helicopter at a constant equal distance from the ship. To achieve this, he must make the helicopter rise and fall with the waves. 2 search and rescue technicians will be lowered onto the deck. One man will control the guide cable to reduce swaying during the hoisting. The other, Corporal Scott Elliston, will hook each sailor to the hoist and ride back up to the helicopter with them, one at a time.
Kind of thinking it's a big boat, it's moving, it's dead in the water, so it's going to be a different challenge. It's not facing straight into the seas where it's a more controlled situation that we're used to. It's rolling differently, which means as things move and we're on the hoist, there's a potential for us to be, banged off part of the boat or hit or something. So you're kind of thinking of how you're going to do the business and, sometimes what might go wrong.
The success or failure of this mission will come down to split-second timing. That's where flight engineer Rob Vedito plays a crucial role. He has the best view of the deck. He must tell Thibault when the search and rescue technician has landed safely and is ready to begin the hoist. As Vedito counts down, the rhythm of his voice signals how close the hoist is to its target.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Steady. Ease down.
Rescue 911 to Camilla, over.
Go on, 911!
We need you to move your crew forward to the bow of the ship, over.
Hey! It's pretty icy over here!
Me hoipereltiin sitten ryhmässä sieltä. We staggered to the front while the boat was going up and down, and the survival suits were quite slippery, so we had to walk carefully. I took the safest route to go across the deck. I held onto the railings all the time so that I would not slide back and forth. It was tough,
liikkuminen oli vähän hankalaa siinä vaiheessa.
The first rescuer is now on deck, controlling the guide cable. It's time for Corporal Scott Elliston to start his descent.
You definitely feel vulnerable on the end of the cable, whether you're going to potentially get banged into something or if the helicopter has a malfunction and has to set down on the ground or whatever, if it's going to end up going down. You're on the end of a cable attached to the helicopter, so you're going to get dragged along with it, so you're definitely exposed when you're on the end of the hook.
Timing here is crucial. Getting it wrong could mean serious injury for Elliston or one of the sailors.
Okay, sir, raise your arm. When we get up there, I'll guide you in. Do not reach out at any time, okay? Here we go.
I had some notion that the crew must have been a little bit scared, since no one had ever been hoisted by a wire into a roaring helicopter. And I can understand it well, since I myself felt some horror looking at that thin wire. How could it possibly carry two men?
The cable may look flimsy. It is less than 5 millimeters in diameter. In fact, it can lift more than 800 kilos at a time. To maintain an equal distance between the ship and the helicopter, Thibault has to constantly increase and decrease power. Because the power is changing, adjustments are required to all the other controls. The helicopter is never stable.
Keep in mind that that boat is rocking like a chair, like 45 degrees each way, and it's moving up and down. So you're following that boat through all that motion. And then, if you don't anticipate properly, the boat starts to rise up again, and now it's coming towards you, so you have to move the helicopter back up.
One by one, the crew are lifted into the cormorant. There are still 6 sailors left on deck, and only enough fuel to hover for another 25 minutes. Right now, Major Thibault has another challenge. The power demand on the engines is constantly changing. To maintain the hovering position, the engines are working at 100% capacity. Now and then, strong crosswinds blow into the rotors, causing problems for Thibault.
Lift up the mold up here, boys. Let's go. Keep it moving.
The crosswinds create something called translational lift. When that happens, the engine doesn't have to work nearly as hard. This constant change causes massive vibration and puts enormous physical strain on both the helicopter and Thibault.
Well, it's very tiring, obviously. There's a lot of turbulence. We're moving a lot. It's a very demanding, not only mentally, but physically.
Do not reach out at any time, okay?
Scott Elliston prepares the 11th sailor for liftoff. 5 remain to be saved. Thibault is keeping a close eye on his fuel gauge. He's running out of daylight and out of fuel. Soon there will be no choice but to leave the Camilla whether or not there are any sailors left on the ship. Even for a veteran like Thibault, the pressure is huge.
Saying that there's never any emotion would be probably lying. There's always emotion. Let's put it this way. If one of our family member was in there, it would probably be impossible to make a reasonable decision. So in many ways, I believe not knowing the people you're helping is probably what allows you to make the right decision, because it's always very difficult. You have to go step by step, very slowly and very safely.
Tietysti siinä on muita.
We had to be calm. We couldn't show that we were scared or in panic, because there's always that danger of fear being contagious. And now we had so little waiting time left that we needed to take it easy.
seat for me, Mayu!
Kun tuli mun vuoro mennä siihen vaijerille ja...
When it was my turn to go to the cable, I already knew what to do. I just tried to do what the guy told me. When we were going up, I remember wondering what's going on in this guy's head. We didn't really talk that much on the way up to the helicopter. But I wasn't scared at that time anymore, because it was obvious they knew what they were doing.
Rob, now Scott, we have 10 minutes of fuel left.
The helicopter has been hovering over the thrashing boat for more than an hour. The winds are increasing, the waves are getting bigger, and daylight is beginning to fade.
Now you get the pressure on the radio, they're like, okay, where are you at? We gotta get going. So then it starts getting even more pressure. Now you're rushing even more because now you're down to the wire where you have to get it done.
Kun mä olin siellä helikopterissa, niin siinä oli semmoinen pallon muoto.
When I was in the helicopter, I looked through this rounded window, and I tried to look one last time. And I did see it down there, floating. And it hurt to see it over there, rocking alone. It felt like, how did we dare to leave it there alone in the dark sea with a storm coming?
The rescued sailors don't realize that up in the cockpit, Thibault and Mercer are now trying to deal with a new danger.
It's killing us.
The additional weight of the sailors in the back, combined with the demand on the engine in hover mode, is causing decay, or drooping, on the rotors. They are actually slowing down.
Last thing you want to hear is rotor. When you hear the warning, rotor, 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 you know that the helicopter's run out of power.
And if you're losing power and the speed of the rotor drops, you know where you're going. You're not flying anymore.
But this time, the dusk was upon us, the storm was coming upon us, you're getting the last couple guys in.
The slowing down of the rotors is critical. Thibault can continue with the mission or abort. The fate of those remaining on the ship is in his hands. He has very little time to decide.
Just going to have to ignore it.
Thibault takes a chance and ignores the warning. Captain Rakala and the two rescuers are still on the deck.
You notice the winds were picking up. It was getting worse. The winds were stronger. The boat was rolling more. So it definitely became more of a challenge as the mission went on.
Captain Rakala has watched his entire crew of 15 ascend to safety. After more than an hour on the ship's icy bow, it's his turn.
It was, to say the least, a little bit difficult to run to the hoist guy. You had to always watch whether the deck was like this or if it was like this. And when the deck was level, you had to run and be careful not to start running when the deck was tilting. The deck had to be level, and then you would go. When I was a young boy, I naturally was hoping that, if and when I went to sea, that I would never have to abandon ship. But that's what happened. And of all things, on a helicopter. My last look at Camilla was when I sat in the doorway of the helicopter, just before going in to sit down. I thought, this is where you'll be left rocking. It is a pity that we had to leave. But there was no choice.
Thibault and his team complete the evacuation in 70 minutes. The Cormorant has just enough fuel to get to St. John's. As the helicopter picks up speed, The drooping rotors return to normal, but the storm is closing in. The sailors settle in for what they hope will be an uneventful journey. With daylight fading, the flight home will be in total darkness and bitter cold.
Let's keep altitude at 200 feet. May as well avoid these headwinds. We might even save some gas. You know, it wasn't that long ago we wouldn't even be flying in these conditions.
The storm is closing in. Temperatures are dropping. Thibault and Mercer know that there's a real danger of ice building up on the rotors. The last thing you want on a helicopter.
Helicopters are not designed to fly in ice. When I was flying Army-type helicopters, you avoided it like the plague. You hit a cloud of ice and you did a 180, you returned back.
Not anymore. The Cormorant is equipped with special de-icing equipment called a Rotor Ice Protection Unit, or RIPU for short. The RIPU system transfers heat into the rotors to prevent ice from building up. But there is a trade-off. De-icing draws a huge amount of power that has to come from somewhere. Ice is building rapidly on the rotors. The RIPU is sucking up power to get rid of it, and the Cormorant is working to the max to keep its heavy load aloft. Something's got to give. The chopper is using so much power that Mercer's control panel, all the instruments he needs for navigation, dies.
Using EIS screens. Prepare to take over. They're standing by. Just give it a second.
So now we're flying at night, low level over the ocean, in freezing rain and snow, and then to lose your instruments is quite something.
I'm going to try switching my signal generators over to you. Here we go.
Thibault transfers the generators from his control panel over to Mercer's side of the helicopter.
Essentially, I was using now his instruments or his signal generator to provide input into my screens.
Oh, that's one way to get the adrenaline pumping, huh? It seems to be
The
holding.
Cormorant heads for St. John's, 477 kilometers away. The passengers have no idea what their pilots have been dealing with in the cockpit.
We never knew a thing about that. We couldn't even hear any sign that the helicopter might have had any kind of trouble. And I have the feeling that had we known, we would surely have thought, okay, we're going from the frying pan into the fire.
"13 hours after the Camilla's engine died, the Cormorant finally touches down in St. John's. It's been the longest day of Captain Rakula's life.
It felt wonderful when the helicopter finally landed at the airport and we were able to walk on dry land, so to speak, without getting our feet wet. It was a really fantastic feeling.
For Major Thibault and 103 Search and Rescue Squadron, it's all souls saved. Mission accomplished.
People doing extraordinary things to help others.
If he didn't do what he did, we would have died.
Heroic acts that have sometimes meant the difference between life and death.
And he was just crying, "Don't let me die, don't let me die, save me, save me."
Amazing acts of courage.
It was just a natural reaction. This guy needs help.
Captured on dash cams, CCTV, and mobile phones. Incredible stories from the UK.
He put his life at risk just to save me.
And across the world.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
All the people that assisted with my rescues that day are my heroes.
We genuinely owe our lives to him.
day unsaved on camera. In South Africa, a couple on a mission to save rhinos end up needing to be saved themselves.
And I thought, I have no idea how we're going to get out of this.
They are over 200 kilometers from the nearest city and help. And even when rescue services do arrive, they are not going to find it easy.
Very concerned that for the rest of my life I would be known as the rescuer who bumped the aircraft off the cable and killed 2 people.
In the UK, a mum on the school run has a seizure at the wheel of her car.
Whilst I was seizing, my foot was pushed onto the accelerator.
Her 8-year-old son has taken over control, but he's out of his depth.
I didn't really want to steer the car, I just went for it.
It's the start of rush hour and they're in the fast lane, travelling at 65 miles an hour.
We soon noticed there's a lady in distress in there and a young boy hanging onto the steering wheel with fear in his eyes.
In Oklahoma, USA, a flash flood sees a woman lose control of her car, careering into a creek and trapping her underwater.
We didn't know if she could breathe, if she could get her seatbelt off, or if the pressure was too much on the doors to even open them.
She didn't have a whole lot of time. The water was rising in the creek. She needed help quick.
And in the UK, a wild deer is trapped by a rope. A trio of wildlife warriors are its only hope. They know time is against them.
The point of capture to the point of release has to be less than 30 minutes. Otherwise, you're looking at a deer that is likely to have a heart attack and die on you.
A light aircraft is entangled in a zip line 100 meters in the air. The pilot and passenger are left dangling upside down, unable to escape.
And there was just oil and fuel dripping down on us.
If the plane dislodges, they will plummet to almost certain death.
You literally think that any second you're gonna fall and you're gonna die.
Peter Gadding is a 63-year-old commercial pilot from South Africa who's been flying planes for 32 years.
Oh, I've always just loved flying. My late father was a pilot. I just had it in my veins, eh? I just decided one day I needed to fly.
Peter's wife, Mary, is also a keen flying enthusiast.
We flew a lot together with the children and without them. We went on holidays together in a little plane. Peter is very responsible as a pilot. He doesn't take chances at all. He's just a really good pilot, yeah.
The pair are keen conservationists and volunteer for an anti-rhino poaching charity.
We have an organisation called the Battaliers. They were looking for volunteers to fly the anti-rhino poaching missions again. And so, without hesitation, Mary and I volunteered. It's just, it's a wonderful thing to be able to do that. I had done 3 various patrols before, accompanied by Mary. I'm controlling the aircraft and so on, and she's a second pair of eyes.
You look out the side and just see if you can find any rhino that are dead or alive and look for poachers.
We're a team, just working together.
One day, the couple were out flying on an anti-poaching mission.
It was a normal patrol. It was a nice morning. The visibility was great. Well, we had pretty much finished flying the patrol. I was about to turn back. I'd been flying for a number of hours. I decided to change the route up a little bit.
But this change of plan proved to be pivotal.
Next thing, there was this almighty crash, which was so scary. It was just actually indescribable. The actual impact was just unbelievable. I'm getting all emotional.
The aircraft hit the zip line. It sort of sprung forward and then backwards. It was the most awful noise, and then we were bouncing, hanging upside down onto the zip line, and there was just oil and fuel and stuff dripping down on us. It was like just the most awful smell, and I thought, I have no idea how we're going to get out of this. I hadn't a clue what was going on. I mean, you just don't hit things in the air. After a few seconds, I remembered, oh my God, we've actually hit the zip line. Didn't think that there was going to be a chance of being rescued. I can't even describe how terrifying it was for Mary and I, hanging upside down like that. We just held each other's hands and just hung there. You literally think that any second you're gonna fall and you're gonna die.
My heart started pounding. I was actually worried that I was gonna have a heart attack. My thought straight after that was, we actually are going to die.
So, you know, all your blood is going to your head and out of your feet, and you're pretty much hanging on the seatbelt, and you can't move because of fear of falling. The discomfort was nothing compared to the fear.
It was just literally like being in a nightmare, but being awake.
Later, saving the couple turns into a risky situation.
We approached fairly carefully. When I saw what was holding the aircraft up, the anxiety went up.
In the UK, a car captured on a dash cam during a busy rush hour is out of control. It's travelling at 65 miles per hour and is in danger of crashing into the central reservation.
Something was going on up ahead, saw a car veering from side to side.
Swerving about all over the road.
An 8-year-old boy is helpless inside, but he's not about to give up.
The car was shaking and my mum was shaking.
The ties that bind a mother to her son are notoriously strong. But for one Colchester family, it's a bond that ended up saving their lives.
My name is Lauren. I'm a special needs teacher. I live at home with my son Ben and my partner Joe. Ben is quite mature for his age, very in touch with his emotions. So we do have a close bond, and I do feel like he's more like my friend than he is my son.
Mum's hair's big in this one.
Who's?
The one he's about to fight.
She's funny. Sometimes annoying.
Ben absolutely loves playing video games. If he's not outside playing with his friends, he will be in his room playing video games, especially car video games. Those are his favourite.
Ben's love of car video games was to play a crucial role on one particular day.
Nothing felt out of the ordinary at all in terms of what I was feeling that day. Right, you ready? Let's go. After school had finished, I was just looking forward to getting home and getting dinner on.
She was happy, she was saying hello to me. She was just driving normally.
We were driving along a very busy A road at the time.
So how was school today?
The journey home from school to our house is roughly about 30 minutes. It does involve a lot of busy A roads. It can get quite scary, a lot of impatient drivers trying to get home. About 3:30, we were talking about our days. Again, nothing out of the ordinary.
But that soon changed as Ben started to notice his mum acting strangely.
I first realised something was different when she wasn't really listening to me. And she just wasn't listening to me. What are we doing tomorrow? Mom!
In a van, just behind Lauren's car, were workmates Jimmy Dowsett and Billy Smith.
Me and Jimmy had been working on site all day and we were just on our way home.
So finishing the day, we're tired, it's December, so just wanted to get home to the family, really. The traffic was very busy that night. People coming home from work, people leaving school. I'd moved lane into the fast lane. A car started veering towards the central reservation.
Something was going terribly wrong inside the car.
The car was shaking. and my mum was shaking.
Apparently I then suddenly started aggressively shaking, dribbling, and my eyes were closed. My hands were still tightly gripped on the steering wheel. Whilst I was seizing, my foot was pushed onto the accelerator.
The car started heading back over the other lanes.
I just assumed someone had fallen asleep at the wheel.
I saw outside of the window that we're skidding against the walls.
Now travelling at 65 miles per hour, the car was dangerously out of control.
Apparently Ben leant over me. He was sat on the handbrake so that he could reach over.
I didn't really want to steer the car, I just went for it.
He put the hazard lights on before he started steering the car.
It was quite difficult. It was very hard to steer it.
We soon noticed there's a lady in distress in there and a young boy hanging onto the steering wheel with fear in his eyes.
Yeah, we knew we had to do something.
Can't say I had a plan for stopping the car. I just decided that I needed to help see them off the road.
The car was weaving from side to side.
I kept looking around so I couldn't crash into anyone.
Pulled up alongside it so he wasn't putting any more danger on the road. If he'd let go of the steering wheel, could have veered back into the road and anything could have happened.
Obviously kept the van in a straight line and Ben done the same with the car, and then we slowly edged it over.
If he hits my van, damages my van, it doesn't matter, does it? You just want that boy to be safe.
And then I steered the car onto the grass.
When they went up the verge, I was speaking to Billy and I said, what's happening? He said, right, they're up the verge, just pull up and stop.
And then it slowed down.
But it wasn't over yet.
She did stop and then she started again. I'm assuming she fell back onto the accelerator and started driving towards us again. I told Jimmy to accelerate because she's going to hit us.
And then she fainted.
Billy jumped out while the van was still moving.
I knew I had to stop the car. Ben was screaming to help his mum, and obviously she was still unconscious at this point, so we stopped the car.
I went round to the side Lauren was on. She was still out of it.
I just checked her airways were clear because her head was back. I checked she had a pulse and then phoned 999. I just remember it being really cold and Ben was freezing cold. Obviously I spoke to Ben for quite a long time. I was very, very worried about his mother.
The first thing I remember after waking up, Ben was next to me, looking quite distressed. There were just strangers around the car making a huge fuss.
It didn't take her long coming round. When she started to try and talk to us, very disorientated and didn't know what was going on and it wasn't making sense, wanted to drive off again. So we just had to calm her down and make sure the keys were out of the ignition.
She was really confused what was happening.
I was trying to piece together why we were suddenly on the side of the road, because to me it felt as if I'd just blinked for a split second.
The two men waited with Ben and his mum until the emergency services arrived and then left.
When I finally got the full story of what happened, it was when I was in the ambulance with Ben and the paramedics on the way to the hospital. I was so shocked. I mean, at first, when Ben told me, I actually laughed. I thought he was joking, and it wasn't until the paramedics actually confirmed that it was likely that I'd had a seizure that I realised that I had just had a seizure at the wheel, driving 65 miles an hour down a busy road. After having multiple tests, the doctors strongly believed that the seizure was either stress-induced or it was due to medication I was taking at the time. Ben has been surprisingly humble about it. Paramedics genuinely believe that if he didn't do what he did, we would have either been seriously injured or we would have died.
Later, Ben and his mum meet up with the men who saved them for the first time.
The main reason I wanted to help was because when I pulled upside, I saw Ben, thought of my own son, thought of my own family, really.
Back in South Africa, an aerial rhino patrol has gone wrong. A couple in a small plane have accidentally flown into a zip wire, leaving them precariously balanced.
I can't even describe how terrifying it was for Mary and I, hanging upside down like that.
It was just literally like being in a nightmare, but being awake.
Despite the life-threatening situation, Peter manages to call for help.
Called up the anti-rhino poaching people and I said, look, we've hit something. I don't think I even realized it was the zipline at the time. And they raised the alarm.
Rob Thomas is a volunteer with the South African Mountain Rescue Team and is the one to take the call.
The message came in and it was a fairly brief message. It just said aircraft crash, power lines, Pilanesberg, stand by.
The rescue services are on their way. They're not going to find it easy.
The 2 helicopters came and that was horrible because, you don't know if you're going to get blown off the zip line.
We approached fairly carefully at the same altitude as the aircraft. We didn't ever want our downwash getting near it. Took a look and our primary concern was what is holding this aircraft in place. When I saw what was holding the aircraft up, the anxiety went up because the only thing holding the aircraft in place is there are 6 bolts or 8 bolts that bolt the propeller onto the flange that is mounted to the drive shaft. And one of those bolts was on the other side of the cable. That was all that was preventing them from coming off.
With their life hanging in the balance, Rob has some difficult choices to make.
If the aircraft did come off while we had somebody at the aircraft, first of all, we would kill whoever was there, but we'd also probably end up with our rescuer getting entangled in the aircraft, which would quite possibly pull the police helicopter out of the sky. So we rejected that option, which left the only real option being to come down the cable.
And that dangerous maneuver fell to Rob, sending him 500 meters down a cable to rescue them.
I don't think there was time for concern over my own safety. It was more a case of just trying to be methodical, trying to be calm.
We could actually see him coming down to us, and it just seemed to take forever.
In this case, speed is not your friend.
Did it very slowly and meticulously because he was also still concerned that if he was to make too many movements that it would also dislodge the aircraft.
I was very concerned that for the rest of my life I would be known as the rescuer who bumped the aircraft off the cable and killed 2 people. But at the same time I realized that that was the only way we could get it to happen. So it was a case of go ahead, do your best, be as careful as you can, and hope like mad and do a lot of praying.
But once Rob reaches the stricken pair, the next big question is, how is he going to get them out of the plane?
Well, the first thing he did was secure the aircraft to the zipline. Then we knew we were not going to fall off anymore. It was just a question of trying to extract us out of the aircraft without dislodging it either.
The first thing that the pilot said to me is, listen, don't take this the wrong way, but I'm really, really glad to see your face. The next thing he said to me is, please take my wife out first, which was a very noble sentiment, but I had to point out to him that he was between myself and his wife, and I didn't want her climbing over him if I could just get him out of the way first. So I simply said to him, sorry bud, you're in my way, here's a harness, here's how you put it on, get cracking.
With chivalry out of the window, it was time for Peter to get out.
He came out fairly quickly. It was obviously very difficult. If you imagine sitting in a garden chair and somebody pushes you over on your back, so you got your feet in the air, I call it rocket launch position. So they'd been hanging in rocket launch position for a couple of hours. Once he had it on, he slowly climbed into the upright position and carefully stepped out of the aircraft.
Even though it was high up, hanging on that zip line, that was nothing compared to the fear of being in that aircraft for all that time.
But as Rob turned to save Mary, the weather was getting worse and fear was setting in.
I put my harness on, and which was not very easy in a tiny little plane, and you're trying not to move. And then I climbed over onto Peter's vacant seat.
She was halfway out and she said to me, I'm stuck. And my initial thought was, you can't be stuck, you're climbing out of the aircraft. And I looked behind her, and the grab handle in the center of the back had managed to toggle itself on the throttle of the aircraft. So I leant over to untoggle her, and as I did that, my feet slipped off the wing strut. So I went upside down. She started to get a little bit anxious. All I said is, keep it together, you're almost out. It was literally a case of she was probably 10 seconds away from being out of the aircraft. We got her up, we got them both onto the wing strut.
It was very high and so scary. The wind had come up, I still didn't feel safe at all. And then they started winching us very slowly. He first lowered Peter, and then he lowered me. I loved being lowered down onto the mountain, and then I knew that I was safe.
The touchdown moment on the ground was a revelation, partly because I discovered at that point that my feet and my legs didn't work anymore. I'd been hanging in harness for so long that I didn't actually have the strength to stand.
My sandals flew out the plane, so I had no shoes on. So Rob decided that I should be airlifted with the helicopter, and then Peter and Rob and the mountain rescue guys walked back, and they just put me in the ambulance and checked me out, and I was fine. My blood pressure was even normal.
There was just this enormous amount of relief. It was miraculous. We were very, very lucky.
The actual tension of that situation only hit me when I got home. It was only then that my brain started to process what I'd gone through.
Well, Rob is our hero, and actually all of them were absolutely wonderful, but Rob was the one who got us out.
I don't think there's any words that can describe the amount of respect and thankfulness that I have for all those people that were involved in the rescue operation.
The outcome could have been very different. Just the fact that they hit the wire and bounced back and dropped enough to catch on the back of the propeller. The fact that we got two people out of there was incredibly satisfying.
What started out as a positive expedition ended in a terrifying accident that could so easily have resulted in tragedy.
I think I'm maybe just a little more grateful to be alive. Yes, and have my wife in one piece and well.
More than anything, it's given me a bigger appreciation for life, because that was a miracle. I would love to do the anti-rhino poaching again. I would do it in a heartbeat.
Absolutely no reason why we wouldn't go and do more anti-rhino poaching patrols anytime that we are able to do that with pleasure. We'll be back.
In the UK, a wild deer has become trapped in the middle of the East Sussex countryside.
This poor deer that was quite clearly entangled in blue rope around its antlers.
A trio of wildlife warriors are its only hope, but any reckless release could be dangerous.
Getting hold of the head, the antlers, that is the most dangerous moment. You can then find yourself being kicked or stabbed with the antlers.
In the middle of East Sussex sits a rescue centre. It's a haven for injured wildlife, and it was set up in 1996 by animal lover Trevor Weeks. But his altruism started much earlier than that.
I've done this since I was a kid. I've always liked the countryside, I've always liked animals, and it's something that my parents have sort of instilled in me to respect nature and respect the countryside.
Kathy Martin joined the centre 11 years ago.
Trevor set it up on a small scale. I just sent him an email, just sort of said, you know, I'm available, you know, if I can help at all, then I'd love to, and so I gradually got involved that way.
It's a labour of love for both of them.
We all work really, really well together. And when we've been able to get an animal back to full health and return it to the wild, then that gives you the most heartwarming feeling you can ever experience.
I think the thing with the wild animals, and with any animal really, is it can't help itself. It needs humans to help them. They can't say when they're ill, they can't say what they need, and it's down to us to assess them and to help them.
Now with a team of 150 volunteers, the centre routinely answers between 4,000 and 5,000 calls a year. One dramatic call-out, though, would end up capturing the nation.
Hello, Wildlife Rescue. I actually had a call first thing in the morning from a couple just outside of Blackboys, which is in the middle of East Sussex. And they said they could see a deer that was entangled. Its antlers were tangled in some rope attached to an old apple tree. I phoned my colleagues Kathy and Chris, and I asked them to basically bring our transit ambulance as well as all our entanglement rescue gear up to site.
The team had taken similar calls in the past, so knew the protocol that was required.
Any rescue like that has to be done by at least 3 people because of how dangerous and difficult they are to restrain and then cut free and release.
When we first got there, this poor deer that was quite clearly entangled in blue rope around its antlers.
Once we're all together on site, we all have a little team meeting to discuss how we're going to approach it and how we're going to cut it free and how we're going to release it.
But the team must be quick, or the results could be fatal.
Deer are very highly strung animals at the end of the day. They've got a lot of adrenaline naturally in their bodies, and as a result of that, when we pin them and secure them to the floor, they're going to get very, very stressed. Do you want to go that side of that, mate? That whole process, from the point of capture to the point of release, has to be less than 30 minutes. Otherwise, you're looking at a deer that is likely to have a heart attack and die on you.
Its eyes are sort of staring and really wide, often they're drooling. You can see their chests heaving. They're just so exhausted from trying to free themselves that, you know, that's what motivates you to get in there and to get into a dangerous situation and actually deal with it as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
They needed to begin by minimising the deer's movement, slowing it down.
Normally in these situations we try to use like a walk towards net. Yeah.
The walk towards net is almost like a tennis net, and we use that to try and corral the deer and encourage them to run into it. It gets them under control and gives us an opportunity then to get on top of them and to control them.
But there was a problem.
We spread the walk towards net around the outside of the apple tree, but it was almost pointless because we just couldn't get it where we needed it to be. Yeah.
To stand any chance of releasing the deer, the team needed to find a way to subdue it without using a net.
Right.
And they suddenly got that chance.
Right. At one point, the deer sort of trips over and then falls, and it gave Chris the ideal opportunity to literally spring forward and pounce onto its shoulders.
And we managed to get its head covered. We use a pillowcase to cover their eyes because they tend to quieten right down once they're in darkness.
Getting that animal pinned down and getting hold of the head, the antlers, pinning the shoulders down, that is the most dangerous moment. Removed as well. I dealt with a deer only a couple of days ago and found myself with some pretty horrendous marks on my arms as a result of it kicking out.
But the clock is ticking.
From the point of capture, we know we've got less than 30 minutes to get that animal released. As soon as Chris and I had full control over the deer, Kathy then comes in.
My role there was really to get that rope off as quickly as possible. You're just cutting it and cutting it, hoping that it starts getting loose enough where you can work out how to get it free as quickly as possible.
For Trevor and his colleague Chris, who continued to hold the deer down, it's a hazardous part of the process.
In any rescue like that, when you jump onto the back of the deer, you're almost imitating what a predator would do. So at that point, the animal will quite often play dead. And they try to lull you into a false sense of security so that you loosen your grip, you loosen control, and then all of a sudden they will kick out and start panicking again and trying to get free. If you lose control of them, you can then find yourself being kicked or stabbed with the antlers.
It's a rescue with danger all along the way. Kathy must cut through the rope as quickly as she can, but they all need to stay alert.
The second most dangerous moment is actually the point of release.
After cutting most of the rope free, I could tell that there was one section left that was holding the deer tightly, so I let the others know that I was going to be cutting that last section.
We then have to remove the walk towards net, get that out of the way, and make sure the deer has then got a clear escape route. On this occasion, we were a little bit concerned because going straight forward, it would have to go through a hedge, across the lane, and then into another field.
The deer's going to feel that release of pressure and think it's free when obviously we've still got Chris sitting on its back.
But the team know they have to get this deer released, and now.
You're going right, I'm going right. Chris called 1, 2, 3 release. Chris and I would then release the deer at the same time.
As Chris jumps off the deer, he then pulls the head covering off, getting out the way as quickly as possible so that the deer can then jump off and hopefully run off into the distance.
He just jumped straight through the hedge, across the road, straight through the hedge the other side, and just legged it across the field. And that was really nice to see him do that, and so pleased. You couldn't have asked for better.
Even though they've done this type of rescue many times before, there's still a tidal wave of emotion after every successful release.
I think you can always hear that in our voices at the end of any deer release. It's almost sort of slightly hysterical. The emotion, it is just such a relief seeing them run off.
Being able to release a deer like that is amazing. It's probably one of the most amazing experiences you can do, to be honest. You know, you go from seeing how scared those eyes look to then that relief on their face when they're able to run away. And it is such a nice thing to experience. It's really heartwarming.
In America, a sudden downpour in Oklahoma is creating hazardous conditions.
I saw a car. All of a sudden, they skidded in the rain and then went straight into a creek.
Emergency services were on their way, but time was critical.
She was under the water. The water was rising, and she needed help quick.
One eyewitness caught it all on camera.
Oh, gosh. My name is Kara Copes. I live here in Oklahoma. It was a spring day, and it had been raining, and it started just getting heavier and heavier. The radio was saying that it was a flash flood warning, and I noticed that the water was filling up on the sides of the road, and the ditches were starting to get a little tall.
Kara wasn't the only driver doing battle with the elements.
My name's John Johns. The weather was pretty bad. You could hardly see in front of you. There was water covering the roads, so you had to be really cautious.
Whether cautious or not, one driver was about to suffer the full force of the floods.
As I was driving home, I saw a car coming in the opposite direction toward me. All of a sudden, they skidded in the rain. I saw the water just start spraying, and then I saw her car start to slide. It flipped over right into the side of the road and was going upside down in the grass. And all of a sudden, it went right into this creek. So the car is now in the water, upside down. I immediately turned around and called 911. I could see other people getting out of their cars and rushing to the scene.
Heating engineer John wasn't far behind.
I was coming down the road, and I saw what looked like just a bunch of vehicles sitting on the side of the road with people standing, all looking towards the ditch. When you see the vehicle, immediately your heart kind of sinks.
Oh.
I asked, is somebody in the car?
Anybody in there? Yeah.
And they said yes. The first thing that went through my mind was, they need help. And then I began to think, as a father, that's somebody's child. I couldn't imagine not doing something at that point.
I mean, she is underwater, probably in a seatbelt. Water is rising. She's upside down. We didn't know if she could breathe, if she could get her seatbelt off, or if the pressure was too much on the doors to even open them.
She didn't have a whole lot of time. The water was rising in the creek. She needed help quick.
By now, other drivers had joined the rescue.
There were lots of guys. Several had jumped in the water. They were yelling, talking about how they could get this car open. Should they break the glass? It was just so shocking.
John and the other rescuers were running out of time.
We've tried unlocking the doors, we've tried opening doors, and nothing's happening. The car was upside down. I couldn't see her. I just knew she was in there. I knew we had to get her out. It's not working. Nothing I'm doing is working. Part of you wants to give up. It's like you can't.
John and the others made another attempt.
We began rocking the vehicle back and forth, and the glass on the window broke. When the window broke, we knew the fight wasn't over at the same time because she still hadn't emerged. When she surfaced, when she come up out of the water, people on the grass all began to cheer.
Suddenly, we saw a man pulling her out, and we were just so relieved. I probably took the first deep breath since I had been there.
For John, though, there was still a job to do.
The battle wasn't even over. We still had to get her out of the water and to safety. The water is still high, water's still rising. We didn't know exactly how we were going to get her to safety.
But luckily for them, the emergency services had arrived.
It was such like a burden lifted off, knowing that somebody with professional training was going to be there to help.
She was a little cold and shivery, but I walked up and gave her a hug and told her, "I'm so glad you're still with us." Nobody ever plans for something like that to happen.
Knowing someone's life in your hands is a feeling that can't be described. There's not words for it.
The actions of John and the other rescuers that day has had a lasting effect on Cara.
I feel like everyone who jumped in the water was they're just all heroes. People just really caring for someone they didn't even know.
I'm not a hero. I was just doing the right thing at the right time. Not helping is not an option if you're able.
Earlier in the UK, we saw a mother saved by the quick actions of her 8-year-old son when she had a seizure at the wheel while travelling at 65 miles per hour on a busy road.
I knew something bad was happening when she wasn't steering the wheel.
Unconscious, but with her foot still firmly on the accelerator, it was down to Ben to try and steer them to safety.
I managed to reach the steering wheel and I managed to steer the car onto the grass.
In a vehicle behind, Jimmy and Billy saw what was happening and helped Ben manoeuvre the car to safety and alerted the emergency services.
We noticed there's a lady in distress in there.
Yeah, we knew we had to do something.
I mean, at first, when Ben told me, I actually laughed. I thought he was joking. And it wasn't until the paramedics actually confirmed that it was likely that I'd had a seizure that I realised that I had just had a seizure at the wheel, driving 65 miles an hour down a busy road. After having multiple tests, the doctors strongly believed that the seizure was either stress-induced or it was due to medication I was taking at the time. Ben has been surprisingly humble about it. Paramedics genuinely believe that if he didn't do what he did, we would have either been seriously injured or we would have died.
A year later, it's a big day for Ben and his mum, as they are meeting up with the men who helped to save them for the first time.
Hi, Ben, all right?
Yeah.
Hi.
What did you guys see?
The first thing we saw was the car veering to the central reservation.
Okay.
So we've come up alongside you, realised there was something wrong, and saw Ben sort of hanging on to the steering wheel. So we sort of just tried to follow the car off the road, really.
Oh, thank you so much. It's quite distressing that I don't remember any of it. I think that's the worst part. I have no recollection of any of it. I can only go by what other people have told me, by looking at the dash cam footage. That's probably the worst part for me.
Please save my mummy, that's what he said.
Did he?
But positives have come out of the event.
A lot of our friends, when they found out what happened, they actually took the time to sit down with their children and tell them what to do if it ever happened to them. So in a way, that's good as well.
So something good come out of it.
Yeah, something good has definitely come out of it, yeah.
And Lauren and Ben now have the chance to thank them.
You're heroes too, really, because I think if you weren't there, he could have possibly been on the road even longer, and something else could have happened. So, you know, thank you so much.
The main reason I wanted to help was because when I pulled upside, I saw Ben, thought of my own son, thought of my own family, really.
A lot of people would have just driven past or just driven past slowly, had a look, oh, that looks bad, and then just carried on. So for you to actually stop and help Ben and stay with us until you knew that we were safe, thank you so much.
Thank you for saving me.
No problem, you're welcome.
Thank you, mate.
That was, yeah, you done well, mate.
I think Ben's a real hero, to be honest. His mum should be proud.
Hats off to Ben. His reaction, his courageousness, what he done is amazing.
I couldn't believe that Ben had done something like that. I mean, not a lot of adults would have acted in that way, let alone 8-year-old boys.
Cheers!
Cheers!
Yeah, it was really good to see them both again. See Lauren well and see Ben smiling rather than crying. It was good.
Almost a year on, Ben's bond with his mum is even stronger.
I just wasn't thinking about anything else except from her. Now I think we have a bigger relationship with each other.